City Council. If you would please remember to silence your phones or other devices. And if you would also remember to put on a speaker card if you have the intention to speak tonight. We have cards at the podium, we have cards outside. Looks like we already have a couple of people who are signing, which is great. Helps us move things along, helps us make sure that we've got everybody's names spelled correctly. Let's begin this evening, as we usually do, with a moment of silence. Would you please join me now for a moment of silence? Okay. Would you please stand and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Used to be a green light on here, I think.
We can hear you.
Got it.
Is it on?
You're good.
Okay. Okay, we have a proclamation this evening, very important proclamation, and it is to help present it and to receive it. It would be great if we could have the Public Works Director and Deputy and our arborist to join here. Okay. Whereas in 1872, the Nebraska Board of Agriculture established a special day to set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. And whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world. And whereas trees can be a solution to combating climate change by reducing erosion to our precious topsoil by wind and water, cutting heating and cooling costs, moderating the temperature, cleaning the air, producing life-giving oxygen, and providing habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. And whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas, wherever they are planted, trees are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now, therefore, I, John Loud, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Maitland, do hereby proclaim April 26, 2024 as Arbor Day. And why don't you all come up and if you have a word or two. I think you got actually a special award on top of the Arbor Day award to talk about, Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
So please come on up and not there for me. Thank you.
I would like to thank City Council for their encouragement and support in establishing the city's urban forestry program. The past year, we have been able to make significant advancements in the development of the program. Last May, we opened our holding nursery where we can maintain an inventory of 230 to 45 gallon trees for upcoming installations. This helps provide a greater variety of sustainable species of trees and lower the cost of new plantings. Over the past 6 months, our staff has made a concerted effort to remove the invasive species within Community Park. Starting on the main entrance of the park, staff is removing invasive trees and plants and replacing them with native trees and shrubs. This project will continue for several years as we work to restore the natural sandhill habitat. Across the whole city this past year, we have removed over 50 dead and diseased trees and continue to identify and aggressively remove potential problematic trees. In 2023, we were able to replace those trees that were removed with over 140 new 45-gallon trees. This trend is planting more trees than we are removing has, for the first time, earned the City Growth Award in conjunction with our 14-year as Tree City USA. The Tree City USA Growth Award is presented by Arbor Day Foundation to participating Tree City USA communities that demonstrate higher levels of tree care.
That's great. It's the first time.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, why don't we take a picture, and I will present you with the proclamation. Up here. Let's take a picture. Okay, well, that really is a remarkable achievement, I think, by the city. It's the first time we've ever got that recognition, and I know that this is something that's very important to the city. I appreciate Mr. Holbrook doing all the hard work I've seen out there planting trees. The entrance to the community park looks fabulous. It looks like things are really turning around as far as that goes. We had a few years without an arborist, and I think it shows, just how important it is to have one on board and to, kind of steward that project going forward. So thank you very much. We appreciate all the work from Chris Kennedy and Public Works and Kim Tracy as well. Thank you. All right. For old business, Mark, is there any old business reports?
No, sir.
Okay. We have a consent agenda. Does anyone in council wish to remove any of the items from the consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll leave them all on. And does anybody from the public have comment on any of the consent agenda items number 2 or 3? Have at it for just those 2 items. Seeing none, let's close that public period. And a motion will be in order.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Motion will second. Lori, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Wild.
Aye.
Councilmember Wurzel.
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie.
Aye.
Mayor Lowndes.
Aye. It is adopted. Okay, now is the public period where anybody can go up and have their say about anything that's on their mind that's not otherwise on the agenda. So this is an open public period. And we have 2 speaker cards here. We will give the speakers the choice of who wants to go first, either Doreen Otto or Chuck Fletcher.
We go together.
Okay. You have 3 minutes, but together you can have 6.
We won't be in seconds, probably. Good afternoon. We're here to talk about pickleball. If you're tennis players, you probably don't want to talk to us because it doesn't seem to be a good match. We're currently playing at Minnehaha, and there are 4 courts. There's 2 on each side of an existing tennis court, and then there's a tennis court on the other side divided by a net. And my understanding is the tennis players no longer use the courts because they're now marked for tennis playing as well as pickleball playing. So what we are trying to do is we'd like to, 1, get the courts dedicated. There's white lines where the tennis courts used to be. We'd like to get those painted out so that it's just dedicated for pickleball because it is rather confusing. And then we would also like to get permanent nets put in. Right now, the city, at certain times, they'll have events and they have open play Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They will bring the nets out at 5:30 or 6 o'clock and they'll pick them back up at 9 o'clock at night. But the courts are open till 10. So we would just, so we'd like to try to make that permanent if we could. Also, a while back, Jay, and I don't know if Jay did it, but somebody, I believe it was Jay, had some bracket holders put out on the fence, and apparently somebody got hurt, and so they removed the paddles. What happens is when you play pickleball, especially when we're getting a pretty large crowd there, everybody puts these paddles in a holder, and they go in a sequence, and once these 4 are gone, they go to a court, and they just, as people come off, they keep rotating in that way. Well, since we don't have that now people are stacking paddles up everywhere, and it's because the courts are kind of tight, it's creating a little bit of a mess because people are gathering there and it's on the end zone of each court and it's causing a problem. And what we'd like to do is I went to Winter Park and they have Katie Way and they have Phelps Park. They use the PVC holder, very safe. They put it 2 feet off the ground, whereas the other one was about eye level, which I could see was, but it was just, I don't think it was even a safe thing. But this is very safe, and we're proposing to get that done. We've even offered to pay for it. We don't care. You know, it's something that we could make, we could either install them or the city could install them. We put them down low, even with the lines. We've offered to paint the lines ourselves, if that makes a difference out of our pocket. The nets we don't really want to buy, but we would certainly install. I own a construction company. We built tennis courts. We've never built pickleball courts, but we could certainly take care of that. What would you like to say?
Well, was anybody able to answer any questions, or are we just up here?
It really is just a comment period. We'll take it all in and discuss it with the city manager and others later. But yeah, it's just a comment period.
Well, we've had several conversations with Jay, and he's been super wonderful, friendly. And Jay probably knows, that I'm like the type of person I like to get stuff done, tomorrow. And I've actually been talking to him since January 14th, and we really haven't. The only thing that we've gotten accomplished is the pickleball system, which has since been removed because it was not the right one actually, due to the injury that happened. But as far as the pickleball courts lines being painted, again, everybody who's out there playing, people are willing to pitch in, and really all that's needed is the green paint to cover up the white lines for the tennis lines. Also because the city is still addressing the needs of tennis players. When you call in to reserve the system, you can't reserve just one pickleball court. You take over the entire floor. So it's not efficient and it's not fair to the pickleball players. So we're also asking, if there's any reason why the city can't create more open play times, and at no cost to the residents. City of Winter Park does it. They don't charge anything for their parts of pickleball. So
we're also real quick. Another thing that's happening is a lot of our players are saying they're going to Katie Way because Katie Way also has lights, but they're permanent and they don't have to go through the hassle that we're going through. We don't want to. We live here. This is where we want to be, but we're just trying to somehow carve out some equal territory for ourselves.
Okay.
So, just real quick to sum it up, we'd like to have the lines painted. We'd like to have a paddle system. We'd like to have permanent nets. We didn't talk about this, but certainly we would like, it would be awesome to have some sort of shading system out there. There's nothing. I did talk with Jay about doing indoor at the school, and apparently there was issue with tape and it being sticky, and I've tried to come up with possible suggestions to eliminate that. Instead of just completely saying, no, we can't do it, I like to always try to come up with a solution, and I think that we've come up with one, but we're still not, we're being met with resistance to anything happening, and, so we'd like more courts. That's probably lower on the agenda, and obviously we'd like to know what it takes to get these items on the agenda so that we can get the ball rolling and make it happen.
Okay.
And I want to say real quick, Lori, thank you so much. You have been the #1 person that has been responsive to all my emails, and I really, really appreciate that. So thank you. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Did we get any feedback?
Well, I can give you some brief answers. Yeah, it's really not an agenda item tonight. This is, to discuss pickleball, but clearly we've read your emails and talking to people, so we understand the kind of the big pictures and the immediate picture as well. So as we noted, I think as Jay put in his email to you, we're coming into the budget season here. We're starting to prioritize projects and what they look like, and so this will be certainly something we're going to be considering.
Okay. So on that note, we all know how things work with the government, unfortunately, a lot slower than a lot of people really have the patience for. And the two things that we're willing to address at no cost to the city, and I want to emphasize that, and timing is critical. We really would like this sooner than later. Number one, the paddle system, absolutely. I don't understand why we can't have something within a week for that. We'll take care of it.
You really would have to see it. I mean, I know it's, you get, you know, each court holds four people. So now you already have 16 people out there. And you have at least 16 to 24 people waiting. And when you imagine the rackets, when there's no place to put them, it's a little crazy.
Not just the rackets, but it also creates another safety issue with people. The guy who ran into the paddle system, people run into exactly where the paddles are on the ground. So now you've created another issue. So it's something that could easily go away, as well as the painting of the lines, which would be a very simple thing. And we are totally capable, willing to take care of that. So really would like to hear feedback on it.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming out, and thanks for taking the time out of your Monday evening to
We're going to thank you.
talk to us
Thank you.
and spend your time with us. Okay, all right.
Do I need to fill out a speaker card, John?
I think we want to wait 10 to look for it.
Yeah, thank you. One of the most famous addresses in Maitland. I love the opportunity to show up and agree with Doreen. But, you know, she'll know the fault was there. I've been on this a long time. Obviously, you know, pickleball is quite the rage. We've been roundly, as much as we can, on a 99-cent budget, doing our best with pickleball. We've got a great location for pickleball courts permanently, with lights, bathroom, and you know what I'm talking about, that wonderful meadow in front of the Sheeper-Decker deck dock. Tailor-made. And, oh yeah, we don't have to invent any other space for it. Bathrooms, might have to do something with parking, but it's something that we owe ourselves to get an active element, another active element in our Parks and Recreation toolbox. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Dale. For the record, that was Dale McConnell.
Yeah.
Right. Anybody else this evening have any off-agenda topics you'd like to share with us? Okay. Seeing none, let's close the public period and move into decisions.
Can I ask something real quick?
Yeah, sure.
We get this pickleball. Is it possible, Mark, to see before Monday, strategic planning, if we could, and maybe we have this already, of a ballpark to what this costs, just so we could have that as a discussion topic on Monday?
What
What it would cost to build, one tennis court is two pickleball courts, right?
Or four. It's four now.
Make it eight.
Depends on how you do it.
How crowded?
How crowded you want to make it. I always thought it would want to, essentially, one court would be two pickleball courts, essentially one on each side. Whatever the number is, right? Just to see what it would cost per two, let's just say, just so we have some information. I mean, I don't know how quickly we can get that information, but if we had it by Monday, just to
I can try. Okay.
even if it's a rough estimate, I mean, I would think, call a contract, I don't know what contractors, even if it was
So you're talking new pickleball courts ground up?
ground up.
Raw dirt to new pickleball courts?
Not conversion of current tennis courts.
Oh,
You're talking about the plan, Mr. McDonald.
I'm not sure where it should go. I'm not making that opinion, I'm just saying, if we were to construct new pickleball courts, what would it cost? Because I know that, look, I'm sure we've all heard it. There's probably, I hear it a lot, where are pickleball courts, what can we do? I've also heard from people that if we convert the current tennis courts to pickleball courts, that's going to have some pushback, because I guess there's demand on the tennis as well. So, again, I don't want to make this, I'm sure we're all prepared to have a pickleball discussion. I just think for the strategic planning session, if we're going to kick this around, it'd be good to have a cost. I don't know, Lori, you were,
I was just gonna say, I know I've talked to Jay about some of the costs involved. Each of the things that they're bringing up have a cost associated, which you notice, even the reservation system has some, although that's pretty minimal. So I've talked to Jay about those things. I have not talked to him about construction of a new one because I assume that that's a large number. But there are costs associated with all those things. But I think on Monday I was going to discuss some of those in terms of the conversion aspect because there is more information there.
okay. I had somebody threw out I asked this question and somebody put a number that was just under $500,000 to put one ground up, but I had no idea if they had any idea what they're talking about.
I think it's about 50. Yeah, I've seen, yeah.
I think that was lights, I think that was, but I have no idea. I mean, maybe it's $100,000, maybe it's $1 million, I have no idea what it is, that's what I'm saying. It'd be good to have somebody give us a number that's even a rough, not hold you to it kind of number. Mark, I mean, I know you don't like that, but.
Google it.
There's just no way to make a, yeah, exactly. There's just no way to make a productive discussion if we don't have any idea what costs we're talking about.
Yeah, and I'm not, and for Monday, I'm not looking for decisions. There's some,
I understand.
there are bigger, some bigger policy issues we need
Yeah.
to discuss on Monday. I can try to pull some costs together. When I say I asked Jay to pull some costs together for me, so.
I'm not trying to add a money now, if it's possible,
Okay.
that would be nice.
That'd be beneficial for everyone.
Yes, that would be. I
Okay.
mean, it's a range of, I mean.
Yeah, it'll clearly be a
More
range.
you
There's gonna be a lot,
know,
there's gonna be a lot of variables involved with it, so.
Okay.
Sorry, John.
That's all right. We're going into decisions and ordinance number 1425. Lauren, would you please read the ordinance title?
Ordinance number 1425, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Maitland, Florida, granting a non-exclusive franchise to Lake Apopka Natural Gas District for a 10-year period, approving the natural gas distribution franchise agreement between the City of Maitland and Lake Apopka Natural Gas District, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Okay. Mark, would you like to introduce this item?
Sure, just real quickly, as your staff report states, the Lake Apopka Natural Gas District serves 10 cities in Lake and Orange County. The district includes a very small sliver of the city of Maitland, south of Maitland Boulevard and east of Forest City Road. However, we're here tonight because we don't have a franchise agreement that allows them to serve in the city. The city was recently approached by the district seeking this franchise agreement to provide service to the new standalone emergency room that's getting ready for its finals and certificate of occupancy out on the west side of the city. The proposed agreement is a standard franchise agreement, 6% franchise fees provided to the city of the gross revenues, which is consistent with other franchise agreements in the city. We also have a franchise agreement with Tico Gas that follows the same format. It also includes a most favored nations clause that if one of these other cities would negotiate a better franchise fee, then all of their members get the benefit of that bargain. Now, since we were approached rather late in trying to put this together and get it on the agenda, trying to allow them to serve this customer, it's a new business in the city. We put together the franchise agreement, got as much together as we could. There are still two outstanding issues, one with indemnity, where Cliff has proposed a cause to recognize our sovereign immunity in terms of, what in terms of insurance, the amount of insurance that we would expect the district to carry. I think we have agreement among both parties what that language should be, although I didn't have it in time to put in the agenda. So if you would introduce the ordinance, that language would be added for adoption, and I would go through that with you in 2 weeks when we look at it for adoption. It's pretty standard language, though.
Okay, I'm sorry. So the last part, I'm looking at this, the agreement does have indemnification in it, but you
Just
would
additional
like,
language.
Okay, it's provisional, and you'd like to introduce other.
Yes,
Okay.
as well as insurance requirements.
Okay. All right, does anybody have any questions of Mr. Reagan?
And just for FYI, Brent Haywood, who's the executive director of the district, is here with us tonight if you have any questions for him about the district itself.
Okay. Mr. Haywood, if you want to address us in the public comment period on this ordinance, you're welcome to, but we're not quite there yet. We'd like to be there any moment, but does anybody have any questions? It was good. Okay, then we will open the public comment period, and Mr. Haywood, you're welcome to speak if you like, or if you don't want to, you don't have to.
I'll be brief. Main thing is, I'm actually the new CEO for Lake Falcon Natural Gas. I've been with the district now for a couple months. I wanted to thank you all for the opportunity to come here and introduce the franchise agreement. I think you all know we're a public entity, created by the state. We're a special utility district, so we're not a privately owned firm. We're here just at the will of the community to serve the customer. That was a necessity. So even though this will be a new franchise for us, I think you'll find out we're a great partner to the community, and we're not going to treat Maitland any different than any other, even though we're probably only going to have one customer in the city. But we also look forward to being a partner to the community, as we are with all of our other franchises in the area. So thank you all for the consideration, and hopefully we can spend time together in the future and have to be a great partner with this community. So that's all we got.
Okay.
Any questions or comments, please feel free to forward to myself or my office.
Okay, we'll do. Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Hammond. Thank you for coming out and joining us this evening. Does anybody else have any comment on this item? All right, seeing none, let's close the public comment period. And in discussion, Mark, is this when you'd like to give us the language?
No.
You would like in the next 2 weeks?
Yeah, for the next 2 weeks. I'll do a strike-through underline for
Okay.
the new ordinance for you.
Okay, so we're on first reading.
Yeah.
Does anybody have a relevant motion?
I would move to introduce ordinance number 1425, non-exclusive franchise agreement with Lake Apopka Natural Gas District, and set a public hearing for May 13th, 2024.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Lord, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Guthrie?
Aye.
Councilmember Wild?
Aye.
Councilmember Wurtzkel?
Aye.
Mayor Lowndes?
Aye. Okay, it is approved. All right, we're out of decisions and now we're into discussion. The downtown Maitland density bar discussion. Would you like to take it away from us, Dan?
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to try and talk loudly because I'm not sure if this microphone is going to fall down at any minute. So, give you a little brief update. So, back in March of 2019, Council adopted, excuse me, the CDP 2035, which is our current comprehensive development plan. It replaced the 2030 CDP, and it was set up to be more of a flexible and adaptive code or adaptive comp plan to see the changing trends that are going on and be able to adapt to them. So the new CDP set densities and floor area ratios throughout the city, including the Main Street future land use designation. Over the past 25 years, density and FAR in downtown was based on parcel size or the accumulated contiguous sizes of a parcel. So this is a chart compares the CDP 2030 to what was adopted one. So from a density standpoint, if you had less than half an acre, you could get up to 19.8 dwelling units per acre by right. And in the old CDP, you can get bonus densities to get you up to 25. The maximum you can get would be if you had 3 acres or above contiguous, whereas you could get 55 dwelling units per acre up to 68.7 with bonus densities. The 2035 lowered a lot of those base by right numbers, bringing the under 5 acres was the same, but when you got up to the 2, 3, and above 3 acres, the by right density was 40 units per acre, down from 55, but you could get back up to 67 with the DICE program, which we'll talk about in just a second. FARs were pretty consistent between the two, slight changes, but they stayed fairly consistent between the 2030 and the 2035. So the DICE program, the Density Incentive for Community Enhancement Program, was put in place to replace the incentive and bonus density program. However, since the adoption of the comp plan, it's proven to be very unpredictable, a lengthy and a very expensive process for the applicants. They had to go through a rough proportionality test, bring it to council for initial workshop, and then with no uncertainty, and then go through the entire PD process, still not having any certainty. There's been several applicants that have come to the city, and none of them have elected to go through this DICE program or option. So the reason we're here for you tonight is that on September 1st, the city will be sending our evaluation and appraisal report to the state. We're required by statute every 7 years to evaluate our comp plan and send a letter to the state, decide if we're making any changes. And if we are, then we have 1 year after they find that letter sufficient to adopt any amendments. So what we know now is that for the past 25 years, the city has granted higher densities and floor area ratio to larger parcels or contiguous assembled parcels. And to achieve any maximum densities, the developer would need to assemble a minimum of 3 acres. And at this point, go through the DICE program. So since 2019, no applicant has elected to use that DICE program. Applicants are finding it very difficult to assemble land within the main street, making projects a lot more difficult to be viable. We've had some applicants come in and look at parcels that were just under the 3 acres. They didn't want to go through the DICE program, and they've all have since walked and not moved forward. So what staff is recommending is that when we go through this comp plan amendments in next year, when we go through the year later, that we want to eliminate the DICE program. And in doing so, we would need to recalibrate the densities and intensities for Main Street, because those are all set based on potential of getting the DICE. We also want to consider eliminating the determination of the density intensity based on the parcel size in the Main Street designation. So why are we doing this? This would encourage the more moderate and small-scale infill redevelopment projects, and would also contribute to the continual successful redevelopment of downtown. And more importantly, providing that mixture of housing types that meet that market demands. Excuse me. Why are we here now? It's because the city is preparing the ear-based letter and any amendments. We're getting ready to prepare that letter. And then once we get that letter in there and they find it sufficient, we have 1 year to do any comp plan amendments to update our comp plan. The state in 2023 now requires the data inventory analysis to be on a 10 and 20 year basis. It used to be just a 20 year basis. So now we have to redo our data inventory analysis. And the data inventory analysis is heavily dependent on the maximum densities and intensities allowed within the city. So with the elimination of DICE and potentially parcel size, the density and intensity will set the stage for our data inventory and analysis. So what we're really talking about here is just the Main Street future land use, which is the blue in the middle of the city, the downtown area. The Main Street represents just 9% of the whole city. The Main Street is also the only future land use designation that does density based on parcel size. None of the other future land use designations deal with density or FAR based on parcel size. So we're talking just 9% of the city. So visualizing what floor area ratio looks like, this graph kind of shows you, if you're talking about from a building coverage, if you can only cover 25% of the building, then a 25% FAR would be that small corner. To get a maximum 2% FAR, you'd have to stack it up 8 stories high. Again, if you're doing 50% of the building, you're going 4 stories if you get the maximum 2.0 FAR, and 100% building coverage, you're covering the whole thing on 2 stories. So here's an example of 3 projects. We have the Maitland City Center, which is at 2.37 FAR. We have the Parker at Maitland Station, which is at 1.6 FAR, and the 400 North, which come off the screen, but it's in between 1.6 and 2.3. But we're not going to spend a lot of time on FAR because the FAR numbers will probably just translate to whatever we do with the densities as we have it in the current ordinance. So visualizing density, this is what it looks like on 1 acre per land if you're looking at 1 unit per acre up to 75 units per acre. And I'll go into a little bit more detail with some better pictures. So typically when you get into the 12 to 18 dwelling units per acre, you're looking at townhouses. You're looking at single-family attached row houses, usually front-facing, small patios, often with very limited curb cuts. They'll usually have parking on the ground floor or behind the units. When you get to 15 to 22 units per acre, you're looking at the cluster or manor homes, which are small multifamily buildings, again, front-facing, walkable. You're getting to 2 to 3 stories high at this point, with parking behind the building or parallel on-street parking. Sometimes you'll have it underneath, but not very often. When you get up to the 25 units per acre, you're looking at the more garden apartments style. These are smaller buildings in 4-unit clumps. You'll have smaller units, so they won't be 2-3 bedrooms. They might be single bedrooms or single and 2 bedrooms. Usually, again, looking at 2 to 3 stories, and now you start seeing the organized surface parking in the back or around the units. When you start getting up into the 28 to 35 units per acre, you're looking at village cluster homes, which are multifamily. You're looking at 3 to 4 stories tall, organized parking courts behind or underneath. Oftentimes they're tucked underneath, or as well as parallel parking on the streets. Then you start getting into the bigger ones at 45 to 70 units per acre. Now you're talking about what's called the Texas Donut, which is like what we have across the street. You have the units wrapped around a parking garage. It's a structured parking, multi-level parking garage, urban walkable form. And then when you get even higher than that, then you start going up to 5 stories and above, again, wrapped around a parking lot. So that's what it looks like. Now, when you look at our housing stock in the city of Maitland, 80% of our land is single family from our residential stock. If you consider townhomes and condominiums single family because they're fee simple ownership, then you're looking at about 88% of the land is fee simple ownership. Apartments represent only 11% of the city. But if you look at it by unit type, then apartments are roughly 50% of the city. We have single family, it's a little bit over 35%-ish, and then you have townhomes and condominiums that represent the last block there. So in visualizing densities along the main street, these are just the main street projects here with that are apartment densities. So 400 North is at 53.67 units per acre. Maitland City Center is at 74.6. That includes the work units. Village Lake Lily is at 56. The Q is at 18, and the Parker's at 58 dwelling units per acre. And we'll talk about the history of how they got there in just a second. Condos and townhouses in main streets. The Uptown Maitland is 70 dwelling units per acre as a visual density. Now I'm talking about the lot that's around it and the number of units is 70 units per acre. The actual developer's agreement spreads it out throughout the whole property, and that turns it down more to like 38 units per acre. But looking at it from a visual standpoint, that's what 70 units per acre looks like. The Maitland House is 17.5, Moorings is at 12.3, and the Maitland Harbor is at 21 units per acre. So our downtown apartments, just the apartments in downtown, again, back in 1960s, before the 2000s, the only real apartment we had was the Q, and that was developed at 18.38 units per acre. In the 2000s, early 2000s, that's when the original the comp plan before me was here. That's when the city decided to go with the bonus and incentive density program to try to build a bigger, better downtown. They wanted to bring more activity downtown, more life. They wanted to encourage the accumulation of parcels so they could have bigger bulk projects. And so you started seeing those take effect in 2009 when the first Village of Lake Lily popped up at 56.8 units per acre. All of them since then have been over 50 units per acre. So our average density for downtown for the apartments is about 52.32 units per acre right now. The downtown condos and townhomes are, again, most of those were developed before the CDP came out, before the previous CDP came out, and those were in the range of 12 to 21 units per acre, but that Uptown Maitland came in at just under 70 units, or 69.5 units per acre. However, like I explained, the overall density with the developer's agreement was 38 units per acre spread over the land. So this is the location of all the multifamily units in the city, with 28% of the apartments are in the main street, future land use right now, and 14.9% of condos and townhouses are in the main street. So overall, all multifamily units are just under 25% in the main street. The rest are out west or a little bit in the center. Of course, we don't have any on the east side. We promised with this last comp plan that we were not going to encroach into the traditional neighborhoods. We're going to buffer the traditional neighborhoods, even have a transition zone in the main street. Our main focus was protecting that traditional neighborhood. So again, multifamily density map, these numbers are hard to see, but the densities are on there showing where they are spread out throughout the city. This is a visual 3D rendering of the downtown in the city itself, showing the apartments that are outlined in black. They're a little bit harder to see on the screen. And then you add the townhomes and condos in there as well. So one of the reasons also that they did the bonus density program is to look at diversify our tax base. In 2019, our tax base was heavily dependent on the office complexes on the west side. And one of the things that the 2035 CDP, being adaptability, was to look at those changing trends and to be able to flex when markets change. So this is, again, in 2019, this was our tax valuation per acre map. If you fast forward it to 2023, we see a lot more in the downtown area now, providing a lot bigger tax base for the city. Looking at downtown specifically, we have the tax value per acre here with MCC coming in at $86.9 million. The Village of Lake will only be 103. The Adeline and Trelaga are outside of the town center, but those provide a significant amount of tax base as well. So looking at citywide and the tax valuation heat map, the dark red being the most valuable properties going down into lighter red till you get the yellow. All of the dark red properties are multifamily or townhome type developments. So the mixed use, the multifamily, every single dark red property is that. You get into the light red, almost all of them are apartments as well. You do have the Genesis Club, formerly RDB, and some of the offices around there, and a couple offices that are in the light red. So what staff is requesting, staff is just seeking council direction at this point. We're not asking for any decisions tonight. We just want to get it in your mindset, because we will be coming back to you with the CDP amendments, with the ear-based amendments. We want you to start thinking about the direction on preferred maximum density and intensities in the Main Street future land use designation, and whether we can get rid of the per acre density as we only have in the Main Street future land use. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions, and I tried to keep it as brief as I could.
Okay, thank you, Dan. My first question, is there a way you can make this presentation available to us, either email it to us or make it available to some site in the city?
Absolutely.
So it would be nice to be able to spend some time, and it's very well put together, a lot to think about. Does anybody have any questions?
Well, I will say this, Dan, I want to just say that, I love it that you and your staff tried something, because if you never tried, then it's always going to be no. So you went out, you tried something for the betterment of Maitland, so I commend you for that, man. So good job. Is there still, do you think in your mind, is there still any way that, that we could still do that in a smaller part, to say, if you're in the downtown area, that you could still say something smaller, but you would still incentivize more per acre, but not as big as we were doing? Because I think what we were doing was like saying, all right, if you go to a pond, you get this, and if you do this. So to incentivize just smaller things that would get them there, would that even be worth it, or is that a thought, or no?
And that's what the whole idea of DICE was. It was to try to get them back up there, but try to do some kind of incentive to give them a choice of things that they could do. But to pass the rough proportionality tests, the applicants had to hire an economist to come here, show you how what they're offering is roughly proportional to what the density they're going to get. And at that point, council couldn't make any commitments or any decisions. So they would have to then try to figure out if that's going to play out, go through the whole process, DRC, P&Z, come back to council. Could be a year or two down the road, could be different council sitting up there at the time. And so it was very unpredictable. So none of them, no applicant wanted to go through the process at all.
So really, it was more of the process than it was the financial. Well, I mean, you have to go through the process. It's still a financial burden.
Right, and
the process.
To your question, can we do something smaller? It would still have to pass that rough proportionality test if we did it in that format.
Right, we go through that almost same process.
Correct.
You're investing it without any security that
Right.
anything will come of it.
Yeah, in 2026, it's yes, but then in 2028, when you have
Right.
4 new members up here,
We've all seen that.
it can change.
Even when it's
See
the
that?
same with
Yeah.
So I talked to Dan about this, I talked to Mark about this. 2019, I don't know, John, you were still here, right? So 2019, that was coming on in my opinion, there was a lot of pushback. We had heard a lot of that, hey, things were going too fast, that 55 units to the acre or whatever plus in the downtown as it stood by right was causing apartments up and down, and there was thought that, hey, what could we do to encourage a mix of uses, I think, on that. It's not that there was necessarily an opposition to that density all over the place. It's that in some places they just want it all over the place. They didn't want it just to be a monolithic block of 55 units to the acre up and down 1792. And I think at the time we heard that. And so I think that the idea back in 2019 was looking at this saying, how do we get to sometimes where 55 or plus is not necessarily a bad thing, but not necessarily by right that everyone can come in and get to 55 units to the acre. That's what I think some of that discussion was. I'm not saying all of it, but I think that was definitely some of the discussion around that in 2019. So whether it be, Dan and I talked to your question, Vance, there could be a way you could go back to, but whatever you call it, bonus density, in my opinion, the dice versus bonus density, it's somewhat of the same thing. In my opinion, it's the same, it's getting additional density for something that is given to the city in exchange that has some value. Could you front end load that? I know, Cliff, you had problems back in the day. If the bonus program is flawed, if DICE program is flawed, and there's really no way to get at it, then it is what it is. Then we go with a flat density, and there isn't an incentive program. But I think the thought was that we saw the results of higher density projects that weren't as bad as some of the speculation might be, right? I was on planning and zoning when Maitland City Center was being developed, and we had lots of meetings till very late at night about people saying that it was going to be terrible for the downtown. It was going to have very negative impacts. And I'm sure there's still people who have that opinion, but I think that it has caused a growth of businesses. It's given us a festival street. It's given us lots of opportunities that have come out of that. So I think density that's big as some of this is for our downtown Maitland historically isn't necessarily terrible, but I think, Vance, you're saying like, hey, is there a way to get back up there? Because I would have a problem just as saying you can go to 65 by right. And I know, Dan, you're not proposing that or asking for it, but if we don't have an ability to get to 65, and there's a great project that could give you a public enhancement and a road or whatever, a park, some amenity, a pickleball court, whatever, in downtown Maitland, would we never want to see a 65 per acre development? And if the answer is no, we just don't think that's ever going to fit, then that's fine. Go to 55, go to 50, go to whatever the number is and set it and be done. But getting rid of any possibility to get above that, I think sort of ties the hands. So I don't know. I mean, I know it's got some challenges, and I do also think, and Dan and I talked about this, I appreciate the 2 acre, the 2.87 acre parcel, the 2.75 acre parcel that wants the more density, and why do we draw the line at 3 versus whatever? I think there's some value to that and having that discussion, but I do think there's also some value to the fact that we don't necessarily want a bunch of pocket 1 acre developments that have higher density, that have no cohesiveness. I'm not necessarily worried about the assemblage part of it, is that if you have a bunch of little developments that have no continuity, who are all just trying to maximize some greater density, I don't think that gives us the amenity side and the overall downtown feel that we're looking for. So I think it's not, I mean, there's not a, I don't think there's a great one answer for this, but I do think there's a lot to think about, and I don't know that just by knocking out dice and then trying to revisit a number, I don't know that we get to 55, Dan. I don't know that you get to 45. I don't know what the number is, but I don't know that closing the door on possibility having more dense projects, but also kind of not allowing the sort of fear of having just rampant continual apartment projects that don't have anything but the max unit count is also right. So anyway, that's. I know, John, you were a part of that. I mean, this discussion back in 2019 wasn't easy. I don't expect it to be.
Yeah, I think, right, that maybe we need to think about, kind of segregate the issues, really. One is, we know that DICE has never been used. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing. It's just that it's never been used, so it's never, so it's what Mike was saying. Do we want to keep it as kind of a potential arrow in the quiver that we could use when that one-off project comes down the pike someday? It may be worth holding on to it. But the other issue really is, are the current maximums insufficient? I mean, are we foregoing any kind of development because they're just insufficient? And I don't know. I mean, anecdotally, I think you've said that there have been developers come in and say, well, 40 units per acre, because I have this size parcel, is just not enough. I can't get my money out of it, and I'm not going to roll the dice, as it were. And that totally makes sense. I mean, a developer just does not want to come in and enter a negotiation that is not guaranteed to go anywhere. And, so that doesn't necessarily mean that, again, that DICE program should be totally taken away. But it does mean that perhaps we need to look harder at the density maximums that we have now. And are they insufficient? Are they not? I mean, you probably have a better view on, the potential developments that come in than a lot of us do. And if we kind of go back to where we were before, before Lake Lily came in, it was the maximum density in the downtown was 19.8 units per acre. And, that was clearly not a modern standard, and not something that we could deal with. And nobody was ever going to develop anything at 19.8 units because it was just garden apartments, and this was not the area for garden apartments. So we changed the minimums or the maximums rather, and are we there again? Is 40 too few? Is 50 too few? Depending on the size of the parcel. So that's one question: is are the maximums, the hard maximums, insufficient? And I think we need to kind of address that separately from the DICE issue. I mean, the DICE issue might hold on, and be kind of an amenity that we can use down the road at some point. But it would be an interesting discussion to figure out what are our densities. Also, at the time, we were looking at trying to incentivize the aggregation of land. And there were maps at the time to show the size of the different parcels all the way up and down the strip. And there were, tiny parcels. I don't know if we still have. You seem to have done wonderful things with the graphics here, and also the parcel identifications. So, how many are out there that, how many small parcels are there really to be had still, or are people really having a problem kind of accumulating parcels into a larger aggregation? Right off the bat, we could look at, Wells Fargo right here, and the shops at Maitland right next to it, and that's easily 3 acres if they were able to get together. to the north, I don't know what it would take to, unlock this puzzle over here, but, how close are they to 3 acres? And, so before we make that decision about, do we want to roll them all up into just one, a one-size-fits-all, we might want to know more about, what are the potential developments out there and what's holding them up, is it just that nobody can get to 3 acres and that's the magic number to make it development work? And I just don't have a sense of that now, because a lot has changed since we saw that map 10 or 15 years ago.
Correct, and a lot of it has developed. In like the example that I keep bringing up is the Peacock Ford collision site. It's been for sale for quite a while. That's 2.96 acres. The neighbor is Bellows. He won't give him any land because he wants it himself. Peacock Ford won't give any land. The only option to get that 3 acres would be to vacate Monroe Avenue and vacate that right away, and that would put him at 3.001 or 3.01, something like that. And the city at this time is not interested in vacating the right away. So we've had probably 4 developers come by in the past 3 years, all looking at that. Becky's the only one that came in and even attempted the first meeting of DICE, and after that, their client said, no, we're not doing this. But none of the other ones even wanted to do the first portion of DICE. They said it's just too unpredictable.
Well, aside from the DICE issue on that, this is where I would say we need to kind of separate the conversation. It would be so they're at 2.96 acres and they get what 40
units per acre.
And they just said that
they said they can't make it work at 40 units per acre.
So does that mean we need to then think about changing either the parcel size or that gets the larger percentage, or have we set the maximums too low to get any development that way? Or are they just waiting and just saying, well, I can wait another year or two and then I can hit a home run if I can just get another, tiny little parcel.
Yeah, I think we set the densities a little bit low when we came back into the CDP. Yeah. Not to mention our code, our land development code, has a lot new architectural sustainability standards. It's got a lot of new standards that cost money too. So all of those are adding cost, and then when you lower the density of the yield they can get, it's making it not viable for these developers.
There's a lot of things at play though right now, because residential in general is not viable in very many places under any economic, currently, under the current economic environment for money, access to money, how much money costs, residential is not going forward in a lot of places. So that's just the reality. I mean, I'm not even sure, Dan, from what you know more, I'm sure the people I talk to, I don't know that adding 15 more units to the acre on 3 acres is going to make that much difference on an economics on a large-scale apartment project. It's not, from what I know of it, that's not going to move, under the current environment, that's not going to move the dynamic over whether that parcel is developable or not. Now, could it be in 12 months? Sure. But we have parcels that have a lot more density available right now that I know people have shopped around and they can't get anybody to take them on a residential project in the current economic environment. So density in and of itself is not I'm not saying that's not hurting certain sites. I'm sure it is. But it's not the only factor right now of why we've seen a sort of stagnation in at least the residential side of development. Commercial is doing fine, and retail, and especially retail, is doing well in a lot of places. But in general, that's just my opinion.
Here's kind of my thought. I think what we're hearing from Dan and his crew is there a want for this, and if so, which direction are we thinking it should go in? So this is what I would suggest. Because this has to be done in less than 9 months or so, right? So we can type it up, send it in.
Well, 9 months for us to provide the letter that says we're going to do this, and then we have a year to do it.
But I would suggest that we just go through the process. I would suggest we give this to planning and zoning, let them kick it around a little bit. Maybe they come up with an idea that we don't think about, and then bring it back to us, and then we'll kick it around and give it the final direction that we think it should go.
I think before we do that, because it'll come back with this same makeup of council, I do think a direction of, one, do we want to keep some version alive of a bonus program, and is it worth it? And I think, Cliff, is there a way to get there or not? And if the answer is no, to satisfy both Cliff's concerns and then trying to get something workable for Dan, is that viable? And if the answer to that is no, then I think we have to just accept that and move on. I don't think, like I said, I like the idea of being able to, someone wants to give up right away, they want to add a park, they want to do whatever, having density be incentivized in that regard, but I don't know if that's just too hard of a goal to get there. You had an opinion on it last time.
Yeah, well, it's one of those situations where the cost of the land you assume is going to go up as things do, but that's not always the case. It was done in 2008. And the biggest problem is cost of land versus return on investment. And so the battle that we fought at one time was sort of an internal one. Do we want to have our hands tied so that when somebody comes forward and says, I've checked all the boxes and I get what I want, we can't say no? That was one view. And then there was, well, we want to be able to say no, but we want to have enough stuff out there so somebody can come and ask for it. And if we like it good enough, we can get it. What we're finding with that is there's too much uncertainty. And so there isn't a great middle ground between those two. However, the one thing that's apparent to me, and I think probably Dan would agree, is that if you want development to continue, which maybe we don't, I really don't know in terms of residential anyway, is to try to reevaluate what is the minimum number that we could give as of right in order to get the development to come here, forgetting all the bonuses and incentives, because if it's not 40 and it's not 55, I don't know what it is, but we ought to probably do some market research and find out where that number needs to be, and then see what happens, and let our approval process be limited to not try to redesign a project, but look at things like exterior design, materials used for sustainability, that sort of stuff, as opposed to what we used to do a lot here, which is try to re-engineer, re-architect everything as if it was our own project.
I think this council is less prone to do that.
Yeah.
And I also think a front-end loading of, we talked to Dan about this, having a bonus, dice, whatever, that was front-end loaded, start of the project. If they want it, they come in, we make an abbreviated process to get there, and it's a yes or no, and then they can go forward on the process knowing what their density is. So if someone wanted to come in and we more clearly identify whether it's a bonus program or a dice program, whatever it is, like I said, don't get hung up on the nomenclature, but whatever it is, they come in, it's a 60-day process, 90-day process, whatever it is, and then they know what their max density is. If they want to go above and beyond the normal ceiling. But again, this was a reaction. I mean, we were battling at the time. Like now, we're sitting back saying, okay, we want to, or potentially, like you said, encourage this development. There was a lot of people that wanted lower density than what even got put up there.
100%.
So, and we heard it. We had people, when we opened up the public process on this, there were a lot of people that said, what are we doing? Why do we want to continue this? Don't we have enough apartments? Don't we have? So I do think there's a balance to that sure we want to promote, but what is it that we want to promote? And 40 units of the acre on some of the diagrams that you put up, and even 30 units of the acre, give us more of that fee-owned product kind of densities that for a while people were saying, that's what we want, that's what we want. So.
Yeah, I don't know what the magic number is yet, and I'm not prepared to even say what I would change. But we definitely, I mean, we have time. We can do some research and try to come up with some more numbers and see what the magic number might be, if there is a magic number. I would like you also to consider getting rid of the per acreage, or at least collapsing the categories or something to not make it so, because this is the only future land use in the whole city that's based on per acreage, and I think that's hurting us as well. You can do a lot with a little bit of land with good design, and as you said earlier, it's all about what it looks like on the outside. You could have this unit over here all single bedroom units, and you could probably get 250 units per acre if they were all single bedroom or efficiency units, but it's going to look the same on the outside. So I think it's all about the looks the code that you adopted, the land development code, has a lot of architectural guidelines in there, a lot of sustainability standards. It's a much different code that puts together it puts together a very good-looking product in the end. So the whole land development code is a form-based code, which is based on what does it look like in its surroundings, not what exactly is the interior on everything.
But to your point, I mean, the 40 units to the acre, part of that discussion was, okay, well then that would give you a mix of both 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms and whatever, and then obviously the 2 bedroom and plus units have a higher rent, and then that had a different component. So just because, so you could go to 55 units to the acre, and then under our design standard, that gets you a bunch of 1 bedroom apartments. Is that what you want? Is that a net positive?
It's not necessarily a net positive, but I think what we're missing is that middle gap. We have very expensive apartments and we have very expensive homes. We have a lot of restaurants, we have a lot of shops here that people can't afford to live here, so they have to drive outside the community to live here, which is adding more traffic to the roads. We don't have that middle housing sector that can bring in the working people, the city staff.
Right, so is that what we're trying to promote in the downtown? I mean, is that the idea, that we would add the workforce housing through the downtown by lowering this density, by increasing this density requirement?
I think offering a mixed product would be a nice incentive. It doesn't mean they have to do it, and the market may not drive it. The market, they say, we want the higher, more expensive apartments. But there is a lot you can do on smaller lots with good design. I'm not saying you can get 200 units per acre on a half-acre lot or things like that. You still have to accommodate for parking, stormwater, and we have height limitations. Of course, in the Main Street, we have the Main Street Edge District, which is the 200 feet or 100 feet from the traditional neighborhood, so that automatically tapers it down to 3 stories and cuts the density by 30% just in that zone there. So we do taper it down. So not every site's going to be able to get the maximum, even if we set it at 50, 55, whatever we set it for. It's a matter of the design and how they work it.
So what I'm hearing, just because a lot of it's Greek to me, although you did a great job putting visuals, which speak to my heart, because I don't, a lot of it is a learning curve for me in terms of the numbers, but I hear a couple different things. One, with the parcel size differentiation, it makes sense, like theoretically, if we were in, I don't know, a Popka where there's a ton of undeveloped land, it would make sense why that would be, but it's basically a farce here because we don't have 3 acres, for example, of undeveloped land in the downtown area or nearby. So it's basically, I'm hearing pointless. I don't know if that's the same word you would use. And then with the DICE program, I'm hearing that it was an attempt to balance all of the concerns you hear, which makes sense, of not wanting to pass up a project that would benefit the city and all of that, but Cliff's understandable concerns that we can't just have we'll hear you out and see if we want to treat you differently than everybody else kind of program, which is generally frowned upon legally. So understanding all of that, it sounds like the big picture, and Cliff said this, the big picture thing is whether or not it's a priority to us as a council, or I guess as a council, whether or not to make it easier or more attractive or more possible, even more pragmatically possible to develop further, particularly in this area of residential development, and if so, we need to change something, and that the DICE program is not inherently wrong, but it's not solving anything, and probably never will. So it sounds like if that big question is it something that we want to facilitate, or is it not something that we want to facilitate? And if it is, then we need to change something, and I do think it makes sense to look at what is going on. I mean, obviously we have things going on in Maitland that are not going on in other places, so obviously we have less land in general and even less land undeveloped, but then we're closer to downtown. We have wonderful schools that a lot of people want to move here for, and all those sorts of things. So it just seems like that's the decision that we have to make in terms of what the exact numbers are. If you're not prepared to say, I certainly am not. But I mean, to me, that's really the question, right?
And our standards still, our land development code still requires ground floor retail for any mixed, or any multifamily project, unless you go through the PD process. That's the only way you can get just ground floor. But ground floor residential on a main street is not, it's not really preferable to a lot of residents, a lot of tenants.
Mm-hmm.
So you're still going to have the ground floor retail or non-residential, so that brings in the restaurants, the shops, things like that. So that's still in play. We're not going to eliminate that at all. We're definitely not looking to eliminate that.
Yeah, I mean, I see, I'm always, as a, like, principally speaking, and I think you're showing us from my perspective in your presentation, in part, like, what these multifamily developments bring to our city, which can't 100%, can't totally be quantified, but to the degree that it can, you have, and you know, some of it is just more of principle and things like that, and we've done the things in the land development code to make sure that design-wise and sustainability, you know, all those things that people are contributing, commercial, or like or I guess commercial property or the ground floor, whatever you want to say, as well. But to me, I would always be in favor of encouraging residential development and filling in gaps of what we still need here in our community, and doing what we can while balancing, you know, what's in the best interest of our city. I personally really trust and have to rely upon and trust what, you know, the experts, some of my fellow council people certainly know a lot more just professionally and their experiences with the city, in terms of where that line is. But certainly I don't personally think that we do our city any favors by not doing anything in this instance, by just choosing to sit and do nothing.
And the demand is still there. The demand for multifamily is throughout Florida, especially Central Florida, is still really high right now. A lot of people can't explain why it's still such a strong demand, but we are getting a lot of requests for it, a lot of demand. And as I indicated, you weren't on council when we adopted the CDP, but we as a city are out of single family land. Everything else from when we adopted that CDP forward, other than a couple little lot splits and things like that, is going to be more density or non-residential use. We just don't have any more single family land left in the city, other than, like I said, a couple lot splits in the Mechanic Street area. It's still single family zone.
I personally think there is value in re-looking at this acreage lines, whether or not we totally get rid of it and say, I mean, Dan and I talked about this. I think there's some pros and cons to having different numbers for smaller parcels, but I do think that lines that we draw probably do need to get looked at. And 2.78, 2.85, and 2.96 clearly are, it does seem like that's.
Yeah. And I think they've heard us tonight, and Dan can kind of get a feeling of where we're at with, you know, let's look at the lines where we're at. Is it better to go, you know, like a flat number across? I mean, is there any way to still keep with the incentivization of it that, you know, would bring some good amenities to a project? But again, I mean, with all of us being on, yourself and you, Mike, being on planning and zoning, I would really suggest we kick it down to them, let them come up with some ideas and report back to us on what they have, and, you know, let them do what they're here to do.
Okay. So I guess one of the problems I'm having is a personal issue. Not everybody else is having this problem. But, you know, before we legislate, we need to know what problem we're trying to solve, right? I mean, you don't go pass an ordinance or pass a law until you know what the policy is you're trying to implement or the problem you're trying to solve. And I guess I don't understand the problem we're trying to solve yet. So I know that, Dan, you kind of alluded to it, and, you know, like, I guess when we have an issue, we engage experts, and for Jay Kahn, for instance, let's see if I can get his attention back here.
To say what
he you know, we had a park survey, right? So you get a park survey, they come back and they say, oh, well, what you need is pickleball courts, and you need more shaded trails, and you need whatever. The residents want this, and so we go after it, and, you know, we're going to get together and say, this is how we're going to, legislators spend that money, resolve that problem. I don't see, I mean, you know, I don't see it because I'm not on the front line like you are. You know, when a developer comes in and says, you know, you're killing me with this X, you're killing me with that. I mean, you know, often that's true, sometimes it's not. But I would like to see kind of an explanation of the problem we're trying to solve. And if the problem is that we don't have enough multifamily development going on in the city, we need to incentivize more, we need to find a sweet spot somewhere to get them in, then I get that. I mean, that's the problem, at least. I understand the problem, but I'm not sure we've even identified that problem yet. Is that the problem that you see? Or?
Right, I think the problem is that the only land we have left is for multifamily or non-residential. And when we adopted the CDP, this last one, we lowered all the densities quite a bit, especially in that middle range, and then gave them that ability to get back up with the dice. But with the land prices being what they were, and people looking at the land thinking what they were going to get, but now they have to get it through dice, the dice has been a failure. There's no other way around it. And so the problem is we're getting developers that are some good developers come in and pass us by, or look at it and say, I'm not going to do this, I'll just go somewhere else. And so we're missing out on some good development coming in because our numbers aren't what we hoped they would be to get.
Well, it's not that they hate dice. I mean, because dice has never happened. It's that they think that they don't get enough dwelling units per acre. And that's the problem they're having, I guess, right? It's not, they don't come in and say, like, I disagree with that dice program. It's like, well, no, I mean, they don't care about dice, but they come in, a developer will come in and say, I'm only going to make money if I can get X units per acre. And the dice is kind of our backwards way of kind of getting to that.
And the dice is how they get to whatever that magic number is that they need.
So that's what I'm wondering. It's like, do we need to reset the number then? I mean, the dice can stay or go, but the number has to make sense. And if we realize the number is not going to, the dice is not going to enable reaching that number, you know, then that's an issue. If the dice we want to keep just for that uniform project that comes along, and we're going to say, okay, it's worth doing. That's it. You know, we can keep that in the tool belt, but I understand, you know, if we really thought, for instance, you know, if you look at that and say, well, it's 40 units per acre, but you can get up to 67 with dice. And, you know, if we were cynical about it at the time, we'd say, well, the real number is 67, but what we want is something, you know, help us get to 67. Because we understood that 67 was the real number. I don't know that that's the case, I'm just making that up. But if the problem has to be dwelling units per acre, and I haven't heard that that's the problem. And then the problem also has to be with the aggregation of parcels, and I haven't heard that is necessarily a problem. I think I've heard that you think it's a problem, and I don't disagree that you are a professional in this, but there's got to be some quantification of that, or some other idea that, you know, I mean, if you show me other municipalities that don't do that and say, hey, listen, this is how they deal with it, and we get there. I guess for me personally, I'm having a problem seeing what the problem is. And if the problem is parcel's too small, dwelling units not high enough, we can get there. But somebody has to tell me why that is. I mean, rather than just stating that as the problem, I need some. Like Jay's survey, I need somebody to have gone out there and said, okay, this is it. And I've heard two things tonight. One is, you know, like you said, they've been doing residential, and then Dan, you just said, well, it's hotter than hell. So, but I don't know.
It's not known. So if I said that, if things are hard to get right now. Residential is not, in my opinion, Dan, because I've had clients that are looking for projects and the money just doesn't.
Well, I don't mean to impugn either.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I would like to have.
So look, I'm sure, and I said that I'm sure there's different opinions on the subject, but that's what I have heard is that money is expensive, and there's a project in Maitland that people have looked at, but they just can't get the money lined up to do it.
And there's really two pieces that we've had all the developers look at, or most of the developers. It's the Peacock Ford Collision Center and the north block of the Independence. We've had several people look at that one as well, and they just can't get some of the people to sell. So they cannot get that 3 acres. We've got one now that's been talking to us that is less than 3 acres, and they're trying to figure out how to make it work because they can't get some of those property owners to sell to them.
But Dan, to your point, you said one thing we don't want to see is a whole bunch of little lots building different things and not, having a nice big projects. And I think if we increased that number for the smaller parcels, you're going to get more of that. You're going to get more people who are like, okay, I can get 40 units per acre on this size land, and I'm good with that. And then they build one little project. So I mean, it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of thing.
Well, I don't think I ever said we don't want little projects coming in, because we definitely do. That is that middle gap that we're missing. We've got over at the Bonus Studio, the Phil Bonus Studio, we've had some people look at putting some like 8-10 unit townhouses there with ground floor retail. We've had some look at that as well. They couldn't get the engineering to work on that site for what they wanted, and we've got some other ones on Horatio that have been looking at. We got a pre-app tomorrow Wednesday, of someone looking at one on Horatio that wants to do a 9-unit townhome unit out there. So there's people looking at it, and again, you can get a good product on a small acreage. It's done all around the country. To your comment, this of all the jurisdictions I've worked in, this is the only one that's done density by acreage, and this is only 9% of the city that we do that. The rest of the city, you get the density and intensity by right, no matter what size the parcel is. So what we're suggesting is just either eliminate that and make the playing field equal, or change the number of, instead of having 4 different categories, you maybe make it 2 or something like that to make it a little bit more palatable to the development community.
Yeah, I'm sorry, just really quickly, I think you said that this, the letter to the state is done every 7 years. Is there any advantage, other than just sooner is better than not if we're doing good things, but is there an advantage to doing it during this process as opposed to doing it later?
Yeah, well, originally, so it's due every 7 years, which is September. It'd be 7 years since we adopted the comp plan. Originally, we were going to go to them with a letter saying we don't want to make any changes. We think everything's working well, but as the developers have come and gone, and when we're realizing the DICE isn't working, we thought, well, maybe this is one thing that we'd want to change, and then that would tweak some of the densities, which is the whole basis behind our data inventory analysis that has to be done. We have to go to them anyway to do a 10 to 20 year planning period now. But originally, after year 2 or 3 of the comp plan, we weren't proposing to make any changes. We thought the comp plan, and we still think 90% of that comp plan, if not 99% of it, is still very solid. This is the only part that we as our staff is looking at, saying that this isn't working, and it didn't work.
So there's a couple things for me on this and what you said. One, I don't have any problem with downtown being part of its own set of rules and being different than the rest of the city, and it being 9% or whatever percent, it doesn't matter to me. I think that it is different, and I think that it should be subject to its own set of rules, and I don't have any issue with it playing by something that's different than the rest of the city. So that's first of all. And secondly, we used to have a lot more districts, as you know, and it was way more complicated, but it broke up those districts by what we wanted to see from density in all those different districts. And so part of the complication of this is done because we simplified it and we got rid of those districts, but there was an idea at one point that those districts represented kind of unique development zones within the downtown, and so they had their own set of rules. And so we kind of had to play with that, and I understood the idea of kind of simplifying and getting rid of those districts, but then we simplify it too much. We kind of abandon the vision and the uniqueness of what it was. And I think there's still these areas are distinct. And so if you want to lay a unit count across the board, I don't know that they all are the same. So I think I understood why we did it, but this is the ramification of what you get, which is that if you're going to lay a number across the board of what should be good for the, what is it, from overpass to overpass, which is I think our DMD is what, 1 point something miles?
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
1.9 or something.
Whatever the number is. And so if we want to say that that whole area isn't unique and they don't have their own set of issues, I don't know that that's true. So I get it, but I think that to oversimplify it is probably not doing it justice. That's just my...
Right, and maybe I misspoke, because I'm saying this 9% is the only one that does land use density and intensity by acreage.
So,
we do have very different rules in the downtown than we do anywhere else in the city. Well, our whole land development code's got a whole chapter just to the downtown development and the different standards that it has to meet just to be in downtown. So it is different. Do we break it up like we used to in the old code where you had the water district? And we don't do that because we're trying to build a cohesive downtown and not a separated.
I get it, but it's different. I mean, each corner has a different, and in the project you're talking about is actually even past the overpass, which was at one point viewed as not even part of the DMV, or DMZD, whenever it was back then, and that was put in the DMV, I think, if I'm right. I mean, we put that property in the DMZD.
DMZD, yeah.
And so, and also to John's question about what problem are we solving, I think the second part of that question is, do we want to even solve the problem? So if there's a problem identified, then the question is, do you even want to solve it? And then I think that's part of the assessment is that, so we've identified a problem that apartment projects are passing on Maitland. Is that a problem we want to solve? And I think that's fundamental in this. And I'm not saying a yes or no on that. But if you got to identify the problem, and then you got to first ask from a policy directive, do you want to solve the problem? I think on the for me personally, on the acreage side, I think that's a problem we should solve. Do I want to get rid of it altogether? I'm not 100% either way on that. I think it's something that we can have some discussion and analysis on. But do I think that, like I said before, the lines should be as hard as they are right now, drawn at 3 acres or whatever? Probably not. What's that right line? Do we get rid of the lines? I don't know. But I think to your point is the problem you've identified that apartment projects are passing us by and they're going somewhere else, then I think the part of this assessment is, do we want to solve that problem? And if your question is, hey, some infill projects that we would have liked are passing, and they would have provided some fee-owned townhome product in downtown Maitland, which is something everybody had thought we wanted along the way, maybe that is a problem we want to solve, and that's the density issues and whatever. So anyway,
in fairness, I heard another problem identified in what you said, in addition to like potentially passing on revenue, tax revenue, and development, and all the things that can bring to us. But I also heard that there is a gap in housing in Maitland for the people who live here, or I'm sorry, who work here, and and other people who may want to live here. And so that was another identified problem. I think, again, the same question is still valid, which is, do you want to solve that problem or not? But I did hear that as in what you were saying, and I also think that I didn't hear you say that downtown shouldn't be treated differently, just that specifically as to the parcel size, being tied to density is what is different downtown as opposed to how you apply density in any other part of the city. Not that density shouldn't be dealt with differently in terms of what the density is or how we categorize that downtown, obviously, that and the architecture, just all the different code, the things that are different in downtown are the different requirements. So I do think that there's a couple of different things that I'm hearing.
So Dan, where I see, sorry, I know that, but where I see looking at this, what's up there, I mean, there's a big stretch for this being the DMZ that you go from a half acre to 2 acres. Maybe that's where we find some flexibility at right there and make, look at that and call that where the line is. One thing I would always hate is to, a parcel that size, 2 acres can still have great amenities to it for, people of Maitland. So I don't know what everybody else thinks, but that's where I was looking. I thought, that could be a nice area to play with right there.
Yeah. Well, Dan, I guess what I was saying about identify the problem, I think you're doing your job and bringing the issue to us to say, hey, apartments are passing on Maitland because nobody can live with this nice thing, and nobody, or the dwelling unit count is too low. And so we need to know that, because, I mean, we don't want grass growing under our feet, and we have, an ossified code like we used to. But at the same time, Mike's right. I mean, we know, you identify the problem, you tell us what the potential solution is, and we decide whether or not we think there's a problem at all, or that
A solution we want to have.
Yeah, we'll say, and it's like, there are plenty of people out there, I'm sure, tonight will be saying, I have no problem with there being no more apartments, and but it's up to us to kind of figure out what the balance is, So I appreciate you bringing this to us and having us, starting off this discussion. I think it's going to take, clearly, and I'm sure you didn't have any other expectation, a lot more discussion to get there. And I like Vance's, point about, perhaps involving P&Z in this as well. But as Mike said, we might want to, have a sharper question for them how we present them. Does this help you at all? Just getting
It has, and again, the whole reason we're here tonight is just to discuss it, just get it on the table. We will be coming back with something, obviously, before we have to send that year letter in. So this is just to get your mind thinking. We never wanted any decisions tonight. We never even expected any clear direction tonight. Just kind of set the stage for when we come back to you. You'll have some of the data already in your mind, and then we'll present more when we come back.
Yeah, and it would help me. I mean, so I would like to review your presentation again. Just take some time with it. But if I had an idea of if you were able to pull together some kind of a map to say, what are the parcels in this downtown strip that are ready for redevelopment? What's sitting there and just kind of waiting what could be aggregated into a larger parcel, what couldn't. I don't want to saddle you with a big burden, but I remember seeing similar presentations before.
Yeah, we had one way back then, and it's changed a little bit, obviously, over the time. Again, we still got it, but the parcels have changed. Some of the ownerships have changed. The north block, we fully expected that to assemble, but we have a couple property owners that are just refusing to sell to anybody.
I'm glad, because I haven't got a haircut today. Floyd's barber. And if they had sold, that would have been not an option.
Well, and the reality is that's we're not going to change that dynamic with whatever
Correct.
we do in the code. And in fact, there has been an argument to me that when we increase density, we increase people's expectation of what their property was worth.
Right.
And so it has made lower density projects not feasible because the owners of the projects, the owner of the property, think that their properties are worth this maximum density count, which makes lower density projects at a lower valuation of the projects just not feasible. So that, I don't know if that's again, whether that's a valuable argument, I'm just passing along what I've heard. I'm not saying I agree with it or whatever, but that has been an argument to me, is that the minimum densities, maximum densities that we put on properties have raised the minimum values of these properties to a level that's beyond expectations.
So you mean like somebody might think they're sitting on a 67?
Sure.
You mean it's really just...
Or they don't even know the code's changed, and so they think it's back in the day of whatever it is, and they just, that's what they think their valuation is. But again, times change, and when you were up here in 2019, there was a loud voice out there that said we went from 0 apartments to, there's a number, 2,000 plus, right, along 1792, and it happened quickly. And so we projects, yeah. We all heard that, and so I think that was just, that's the reality of it. And that was actually, I don't think 400 North was open yet when we had that discussion. I think it was under construction, or it was about to be developed when we were having that, and people were saying, hey, look, we're about to get more units coming online. I'm not saying we don't want it. I'm just saying that those voices were loud in 2019, and so. And every kind of policy direction kind of evolves with time. So we learn lessons, and we implement those lessons, and we see what we want. So.
And my question would be: are you still hearing those concerns today? Are they still out there?
I mean, I hear it. I hear the concerns about apartments for sure.
There's always going to be people that are
But
like
there's
that.
always gonna be, but
There's
the
going to be the people
apartments-
who live in single-family housing who have a problem with it. And a
Agreed.
lot of it's based on misunderstandings, misconceptions. But there are always going to be those people.
Right, and I think for the reason they did it back then, having these units built us the Independence Lane, the park, the hangout where the First Friday is. That would have never happened had this mass not accumulated. The grocer, everything that's coming in, a lot of that is because we have the rooftops now to support it, and that's important. And my wife is the same way. I know she's not listening, so I can say this, but she's the same way. She's very anti-apartment until she realizes what it brings in and what new stores pop up and new shops and restaurants and all that stuff. And she realizes that it's not overcrowding the schools. It's not creating all the crime. It's not doing all these myths that everybody thinks they're doing. And it's taken me years to convince her of that as well. It's change, and change is scary to people, especially when you're used to a suburban community that is primarily single family for many, many, many years.
And that's the conversation, I mean, I've had that. I mean, I talked to you, Dan. I got to chair the meeting then, because I was vice chair at the time, but then the chairman left for something, had a meeting, so I got to chair the meeting that was the final P&Z. Now I had to go to city council, but it was the final meeting on city center. And we pushed that through 4-0 at the time, and that was a monumental shift in kind of how people view downtown Maitland. So I clearly tell, all the time when people tell me and stop me and say, we got too many apartments, I say, well, do you like First Fridays? Do you like the Independence Square? Do you like, and so we have that discussion all the time. So I get it. There's clearly a balance, and we just have to strike that balance. And that balance point shifts through our time. Because clearly, 40 years ago, if someone had said we're going to have more than 10 units of the AVA, whatever, people would have thought you were crazy.
Well, but, I mean, you bring a good point, and what kind of concerns me is, we can go down in history, is that, you have the Parker and the other ones, and, they just came in and said, we're just going to build a square box, and that's it, and we got nothing nothing for the community out of that. So I think when we look at these things, we kind of need to also remember that and say, well, if we're building, let's build for the community and not for the developer.
So on the station, whatever, I mean, the Parker, or whatever it's called, the issue with that one was our desire for some retail, and then they said no, and we asked again for some retail. They said no again. But I think that was pre the change of this code, so I think the code as written now solves that problem with whatever we called it, main streets had to have retail on the bottom, and it was a much higher percentage, because what we were even asking for on the station, Parker, was
you wanted a little store.
It was a de minimis square footage, which may or may not have been a good idea or work, whatever, but again, I think we've addressed that through the code is what I did.
Ever since all three of these big ones came in downtown, the comp plan has changed and the land development code has changed and require a lot more architectural guidelines than we ever did in the past. Definitely more sustainability. We didn't have sustainability standards in the past. All of our standards changed, so that the look and feel of what you see is going to be different from what you see here, unless they would have met the code today.
There's a difference to me between changing our density so that we can attract, we're begging for apartments to come here, which is not really what I hear anyone saying, I really want more, I want to make sure that they come here, versus are we doing things maybe even a little bit deliberately or keeping them deliberately to repel that. And when we have things that we're being told are objectively nonsensical, which is just my interpretation, such as tying density to parcel size, I don't understand what the rationale is or was for that. It doesn't seem to make logical sense to my brain. And to have these sort of the DICE program, all it to me, and I wasn't there, but it seems it's we really don't want this, but just in case there's a really great project that maybe we will want, we're gonna keep it open for that. And to me, that's also nonsensical. That some developer is just going to want Maitland so bad that they're going to go out of their way to spend money and hope and pray that that investment returns and that we say okay to them based on this complex thing. And so I think that there's a difference between these extremes, and I'm not suggesting, nor do I think anyone is, that we raise our density to whatever the highest is anywhere in Orlando. Let's just up it by 1 so that they all come to us. I don't think that's what we're saying at all. But are we preventing it, and are we doing that on purpose?
I think so. With the DICE program, a lot of it was, sustainability driven, or stop me if I'm wrong, Dave, but it was more sustainability driven. Like we would get like a little park area, some trees, something.
But it's not realistic. Like, it's not realistic that anyone's ever, I mean, they haven't, but
or they would do something on their own property to make it more sustainable than what we would require. So if they put up a flower garden up top or something like a vegetable garden, you'd get points for that. Or, I mean, there is a whole list of sustainable features that if you did this to make it better, you would get more
But
density.
they have to hire an economist. And the reason for that is because that's where the cliff comes in. That's where the objective criteria comes in. I know that that's not what the council wanted.
Yeah, that's what we're saying.
That
It's
was
not
the council
working.
was like, we really want an economist. It was because it has to be objective. And that's the issue. Or we could have some objective point system, but then council wouldn't want that either, because it's like, well, we still want to kind of find a lost six. And so that's the issue. I don't think that the intentions of the program are bad, but again, it's just this idea of like, we don't want to be the place that passes up on everything, but we also kind of don't want to welcome everything. And so we're kind of in this, I feel like we put ourselves into this impossible position where really what we're ultimately doing is repelling development.
Before 2019, if you went to the website for our city, it had a big glowing sign that said "Open for Business." And I'm not lying, it's open for business. And we were ready just to sell to anybody and make deals. And I mean, there's even some news clips about that, and we won't get into that. But I mean, we were kind of selling ourselves out, and I think Dan came in and made a good thought is, listen, we're a high quality place, and this is what we're going to do. And to increase the betterment of the project, we're going to do this DICE program to enhance it. But, we're finding out that that didn't work, and that's why we're saying, well, we like part of that. Can we still keep part of that in a way? I mean, just because that was no doesn't mean that there's not some little parts that maybe we could work something a little different.
But that's what that's what the land development code and all those changes did, was take care of a lot of these incentives, right?
Oh, he still has it where it's like, when you come in, you have to do these and these, but the DICE was if you went farther in.
With the DICE, you had to propose a enhancement for the community that would benefit, and then you had to show how it's roughly proportional to the density you're getting. The former bonus density program was very subjective. It had a lot of different things, and that was one of the big arguments with it, is that I could come to you and say, I'm going to put flower pots on the bottom of my apartment complex, and council would be like, that's great, let's give you the maximum density. There was no rational proportional test to it. It was just what they asked for and what council felt like that day to give them. So they could do off-site infrastructure and use open space off-site or parking. They could do all sorts of stuff and get credit for it and get densities for it. They can get height density, or they can get height increasement, they can get density increasement. There was a bunch of different things they could get with these bonuses, and it was just purely...
Well, this project used a bunch of them.
Yeah, this over here, if you go through that and it's covered, that they gave them open
It's not that
space
the
for
idea
that.
is bad. I just think at the end of the day, pragmatically, because there's this whole thing called lawsuits and all those considerations, that's why it's bad. That's why it's not working. Because we have to make things objective, which we did, and that's why. It's not that the idea or the spirit behind it is bad, but that's the problem, and the issue is that that's the reality. That's reality we live in, and therefore we have to adjust. And it sounds like our code has been developed and changed over time to allow, for some of these requirements that we want with sustainability and all these things. But again, if transparently people say, I don't really care if more development comes, then that is everyone's entitled to that position. I just think that then we need to be transparent when that is our position and not come up with program. And I'm not saying that that's what happened at that time, but now that we know and we've seen that that's the reality, I think we should, just as much as we want Dan to establish or whomever to establish that there's a problem, we maybe should also, because it is time and we're required to review this anyway and all of that, to look at what is the justification for tying this to parcel size. And that's a rhetorical question for right now, but you know, like what is the justification? Why is that something we do that we don't do anywhere else, and how does that matter? You know, we should also kind of hold ourselves to that standard to have to kind of critically look at what we do.
Right, so how does that matter? So, yeah, how does it matter what, you know, the size of the parcel? I guess what we're kind of moving away from and toward is kind of this lingering idea that developers have to come in and do something for the community, which is really not what their portfolio is, right? I mean, they're there to make a development, right? And so the dice was, well, you can have X if you'll give us something for the community, and it, you know, that it becomes it's a legally difficult thing because, you know, private property rights will tell you, you know, why does a developer have to come in and do something for the community? Why would you have to do something when you build your own single-family home? Why would you have? Well, you do things for the community. You pay your taxes and you pay your park, you know, impact fees, and you pay your mobility fees, and you pay your. I mean, those things are paying for the community's, you know, improvement. For us, really, what we'll be doing is sitting here in creating a vision for what we want this downtown strip to look like. And do we want to say, you know, get rid of the dice? I mean, there's clearly a good reason to do that. Get rid of the dice and just set the maximums at what the maximums are, and understand what that will bring to a particular parcel. What will the Wells Fargo parcel look like if you give 67 units per the acre as a matter of right? What will the and that's what we're here to do, really. I mean, we can't plan each development. It's not our job. It's not the American way for the city council to sit here and tell what paint colors everybody's got to have. I mean, it's so, and that's why I'm asking what the problem is. The problem is that we need to fill in these areas that are just never going to otherwise develop, and we need to know what the economics of that are and how do we get them developed. Also, to Mike's point, do we want to solve that problem, or will we be happier if it's just sits the way it is? You know, or would we be happier if it's 2 stories instead of 3 stories? And we can control that. We can say it's 2 is our maximum. You know, 40 units per acre is our maximum. But we got to visualize what that looks like by parcel, and then let everybody have as a right the rights they're given in the ordinance. And so I just think that we need to kind of visually and intuitively understand what that looks like, so it doesn't become just a row of 6-story apartments all the way down 7092.
And the aggregation, the aggregation did have its value at the time. I'm not saying it still has its value, but when you look at what Maitland City Center was, and we all remember it was a Winn-Dixie. It was a goody Winn-Dixie, and then it was a strip center with Subway and Jeremiah's and whatever. And if you didn't combine those, if you'd let them each develop independently, it probably would have been a harder project to plan around. It would give a festival street or whatever, because it wasn't that unified development. So at the time, and I don't remember because it was set well before my time as far as the aggregation was, but I think there was some logic to it at some point. Now, whether that logic still has value in today's world of existing parcels, I don't know.
So you take the Texas donut route, you know, I mean, really what that thing is that it's a parking garage with some apartments wrapped around the outside. So that means that we didn't have to fill up a bunch of empty space with surface parking lots, and there's cars parked all over the street. But you couldn't have done that if we just had 2 little half-acre parcels that were, nobody's going to be able to have that much mass to
put a liner garage. Right, and they were able to create a 1-story out parcel, for lack of a better word, of those strips of outpost, and then F45 behind it, and then also some of that other retail that wouldn't necessarily have been possible if you develop it individually.
Right.
So there is, to say And I think at the time, again, whether or not it still holds true to today, I don't know.
Well, and I would agree, I think at the time it was beneficial. I actually went back, and there's on the screen is a couple pictures. I went back and looked at the four big ones downtown and looked at what they were pre and post, and you can see there's a lot, it's hard to see up there, but there's the parcel lines are on there. There were a lot of small parcels that were easier to accumulate back then, which this is MCC and Parker, but we also had the 400 North and 400 North and Parker. The other one was, yeah. So they were back then. There were a lot easier to accumulate the parcels. Today, it's not so much. A lot of it is in bigger blocks now, or has the smaller ones that just refuse to sell. So I also went back and looked at what does 20 units to the acre look like on a half acre, or 30 or 40 or whatever, and came up, saw some good examples. And when I send you the presentation, I'll include those in there. But it had what some of the higher densities on lower lots could look like if they're done right. And it's a matter of how they're engineered and how they take into account the stormwater, the parking, all the different things that go into it.
Maybe that's why they make us review it every 7 years, Dan.
Well,
No,
and
that's
state
fine.
laws change, so they make us update.
It makes sense little by
Yeah.
little, and it makes sense that the community adjusts little by little as well. And I think that the DICE program inherently, like, I don't think it would matter if it stayed. I just heard that it was an exchange for lower density as a matter of right. We said, oh, we'll lower it, but then there's this, and that concession just doesn't make sense anymore. It sounds like, not that the program couldn't just exist, if I don't see any harm that we're hearing for its mere existence, but.
Right.
It's a tough problem.
So, it is, and I appreciate the feedback tonight. It's actually been really good feedback. And when we do come back to you, we'll have some more data for you and some more justifications for what the problem may or may not be. It may not be a problem. So.
Again, Dan, thanks for, really, trying,
For all
I mean,
the
it's not
issues.
exactly what we thought would happen, but you tried, and that's awesome, man, so.
No, you don't always get what you want every time.
We'll give you the most improved trophy award later.
I need another blue
Honorable
ribbon.
mention,
or
yes.
What color is that one? Purple ribbon?
Oh, I should know. I collected a lot of honorable mentions as a child.
You got a lot of awards for the code.
You did,
Yeah. I mean, you did a great job on the code.
Yeah, I think
Field
so.
day.
So we're just going to give you more awards for it, is what you
All right.
said. But you did a great
I do
job.
like purple
First
ribbons.
Okay, well, I think that concludes that discussion.
It was
Well,
fun.
for tonight anyway, and yeah, it is a lot of food for thought. Reports. Mr. City Attorney, nothing. After our legislature has done their work, it might be nice to have a kind of update, yeah. So, just see what the day will be.
You get one, well, maybe you can put it in writing so you'll have it in minutes.
Mr. City Manager, any?
Yeah, just real quickly, just to follow up on a couple of events we had. We had the household hazardous waste collection, collected 17 pallets of household hazardous waste, so that'll be disposed of properly, won't end up in our landfill, so that was certainly a huge success. Next Sunday, the 28th, is our tree giveaway, annual tree giveaway down at Lake Park and the venue. The combination starts at 8 o'clock, so get in line early, they go fast if you want a tree. Get downtown, May 3rd, last of the season. We have our Maitland Farmers Market on June 9th, shooting out a little bit of future. We're going to also do a touch truck event with that, coordinated through Public Works. So Jay, Tiffany, Robert, and Kim are putting that together. So we'll have some of the trucks out in the park on the farmers market. So it'll be a little family event. They can get to know what our trucks look like, what our apparatus look like. Your little from Earth Day market. This is actually a little lavender in here. You take the top off. All you do, just add water. A little piece of lavender is going to grow out of here. Keeps mosquitoes away. These were our giveaways. They were wildly popular, so I knew they would be wildly popular.
I'll be able to report if they're that easy.
They seem peaceful. That's all I have.
Okay. Mike?
Well, I don't want to get into this. Well, we should not mention that Mark is on top of the review of the water thing. And so I know we all heard it, and I know we all have full confidence that Mark is looking at all things related to it. And so I don't think we should go a meeting without just mentioning it, but we also should go notice that I know Mark does a great job, our communication does a good job, so we're going to look over all of this and make sure that everything was done, but I'm confident that Mark's on top of it.
Yeah, I think that's worth mentioning. I think this is a time where we can kind of figure out what worked, what didn't work, and luckily it was a situation where it was not, no one's health was really at risk at this one, but for the future, we want to know that our communications are right on. So yes, so that's listing out there. That's
I think that was the first one. I moved here in 2016. No, in 2006, and there might have been one then, but I don't. Nope. This is the first one I ever remember. So I mean, there's other towns here that you hear about all the time having to do it. So that's great.
Just a reminder of strategic planning next Monday.
Right.
Community Park. See y'all there.
Okay. Pay attention.
Yeah, I want to mention what I mentioned to you when you got here. So really proud this weekend. Edgewater High School had their little ring of honor that they do for past students, and 3 great members were part of that. So one of them was Judge Bob Egan, grew up on Druid Isle, and he was honored to be in the Ring of Honor at Edgewater High School. And so is Bill Palmer, who rowed and he coached rowing at Edgewater. His uncle serves on our Lakes Advisory Board. And then I think everybody knows Rush Rollins from Monsters in the Morning. He was honored, came in looking dap in his big red suit with his black tie. So fly high Eagles. Yeah, West Side. That's it.
Yeah, and Vance and I went to high school with all 3 of them.
Yep.
And I don't know that anybody thought at the time. No, no, congratulations to all of you guys.
Yeah.
Okay, Lori, nothing at all. Okay, thank you. We are adjourned.
Another fun night.
Development.